Take, oh, take me as I am. Summon out what I shall be. Set your seal upon my heart and live in me. Every one of our scripture lessons today has been about how God has set his seal on the hearts of certain people. Let's call it the power of the call. When God created us in his own image and after his own likeness, he also called us into a relationship with him. I will be your God, and you will be my people. And so he gave us a built-in desire to respond to his call upon our lives. So think about that for a moment. You were called for a purpose. In those stories that we just read, we could have read many more. Those were simply a sampling of many encounters in the Bible and many encounters in history when people heard God calling them into his service. And each person and each call was different. One was to a boy, Samuel. Scripture says that at the time he didn't know God personally. He only knew what had been taught to him about God. When he eventually recognized that it was God calling him, remember his response? Speak, I'm your servant, ready to listen. Another was Isaiah. Now, we don't know very much about Isaiah's background, but he was born about 700 years before Jesus. And he had a vision of God. And he heard God's invitation. Whom shall I send as a messenger to this people? Who will go for us? And Isaiah responded, Here I am, send me. And Isaiah went on to become one of the greatest prophets of all time. There was Mary, a young virgin girl around 13 or 14. An angel, a messenger from God, appeared to her and told her that God had chosen her to be the mother of the Son of God, the long-awaited Messiah. And despite her confusion at the news, Mary responded, I am the Lord's servant. May everything you have said about me come true. Next, we read about the call placed on Jesus' life. His first response to that call was to be baptized, as some of our new members will be this morning. Later, Jesus used the words of the prophet Isaiah to describe his call. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim that captives will be released, that the blind will see, that the oppressed will be set free, and that the time of God's favor has come. Then there's the calling of the disciples. We read particularly this morning about how God called Simon, Peter, and Andrew. He walked up to them as they were going about their daily business, and he said, "Come, follow me, and I will show you how to fish for people." And their response is recorded this way: "And they left their nets at once and followed him." And finally, again, from the many examples we could have chosen this morning, there was Saul, the great persecutor of the Christian church. And we read this, that as he was approaching Damascus on this mission to capture those who followed Jesus and imprison them, a light from heaven suddenly shone down around him. And he fell to the ground, and he heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And this was his response. "Who are you, Lord?" Saul asked. And the voice replied, "I am Jesus, the one you are persecuting. Now get up and go into the city, and you'll be told what you must do." And Saul says, "Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord." And as a result, went on to become the greatest missionary of all time. Now we can learn at least 3 things from all of those stories. 3 truths that we can affirm about the power of God's call. Whether he's called you to serve him in a ministry within this congregation, whether he has called you to live out your Christian faith wherever you are in your working life, or whether he's called you to serve him in your retirement years. 3 things we can affirm about God's call. First, God's call upon our life is powerful. It changes us, just as it changed Samuel and Isaiah and Mary and Peter and Saul and all of the others in history. Second, we can affirm that we're all different. Just turn around to your neighbor and just say to them, "You know, you're different." Okay, don't take it too seriously. You see, we're all different. We're all different, and so God calls us in different ways and at different times in our lives. Oh, by the way, if you're sitting here thinking, "Well, you know, I'm too old to be any use to God," can I just say the word Abraham? It says about Abraham in Genesis chapter 12, "Then the Lord told Abram, 'Leave your country, your relatives, and your father's house, and go to the land that I will show you.'" In other words, uproot yourself, travel hundreds of miles to a new place and reestablish yourself again. Scripture says Abraham was 75 years old. Abram was a senior when God called him into service. And third, remember that we don't always jump up for joy when God calls us. We're often hesitant, scared, and we often feel unworthy. We're sometimes reluctant. We'd rather run away and be swallowed by a large fish like Jonah. or walk away like the rich young ruler who wanted to follow Jesus, but when Jesus said to him, there's only one thing you need to do, give away what you have, and then come follow me. And that rich young ruler determined the price was too high. Let me briefly tell you my call story. I'm a preacher's kid. Grew up in the church, had devout Christian parents and Christian grandparents. I'm the fourth generation in ministry. I went to Sunday school and youth group. I became a leader within the Church of Scotland youth movement. But none of those things, none of my credentials, if you like, actually mattered. What mattered was that when I was 15 years old, I heard God's call to make a commitment of my life to Jesus Christ. But I had absolutely no intention of becoming a minister. Not one thought. I gained an honours degree in economics, history, and politics. My heart was set on being a history teacher. My course in life was set. And while all of that was happening, I started to have a gradual awareness that God was calling me into ministry. My answer, not a chance, God. That's one hereditary disease I don't want to catch. But because disobedience has a cost, Jesus led me into what the ancients have called a dark night of the soul. In fact, many dark nights of the soul. And those lasted for almost a year, until one night, in total frustration, I said to God the same prayer that Jesus said, "Let this cup pass me by, but your will be done, not mine." And at that point I said, "Okay, God, I'm in." And the power of God's call overwhelmed me, and it still does today. So I went to seminary, got my Bachelor's of Divinity degree, and prepared myself for a life as a minister of the Church of Scotland. That's why I practiced my accent. And that's when I heard God tell me to come and serve him in Canada and within the Presbyterian Church. Not my plan at all. But just to mess with me, God sent me to Saskatchewan. Like, why not the Presbyterian Church of America and send me to Florida? I got sent to Saskatchewan. But that's the power of God's call. Now, trust me, I had every reason and excuse of why I wasn't good enough, smart enough, gifted enough, spiritual enough to be called into ministry. And Jesus blew through them all and simply said, "Come, follow me." And when you do that, when you answer his powerful call, your life changes. Now, understand me here. I was called into full-time ministry. That was God's unique purpose for my life. His purpose for your life will undoubtedly be different, and that's okay. It's just not okay to ignore his call upon your life. Remember our scripture readings? God calls all kinds of people to all kinds of different forms of ministry. Your calling may be to be a parent, or a school teacher, or a business person, or a medical professional, a laborer, an office worker. He may call you in your retirement to something that you never imagined you'd ever do. What you are, how you serve, is not nearly as important as understanding that Jesus calls you to follow him. All you need to do, what you must be willing to do, is to respond to that call and to let that call permeate and direct your life. Now, as you know, next Sunday is an exciting Sunday here at First Church, when the Reverend Alton Ruff comes to what we Presbyterians call Preach for the Call, to be the new minister of our congregation. The search committee unanimously felt that God was calling him to be our new minister. The session unanimously affirmed the decision of the search committee. And I know in my conversations with Alton that he feels the power of God's call to come here as our new minister. And next Sunday, you will have the opportunity to discern God's call when we vote on whether to call him to be our new minister. Now, let me be clear. Reverend Alton is not like Reverend Tim, any more than Reverend Tim was like Reverend Khan, any more than Reverend Khan was like any other minister you've ever had. And Reverend Alton certainly isn't Reverend Neil, because he doesn't have my accent. God's call upon Alton's life, the gifts and the talents that Alton has been given, his particular strengths and interests in ministry are determined and shaped by the power of God's call upon his individual life. But that shouldn't surprise us, because that's true for Abraham, Moses, Samuel, Jonah, Jesus, Paul, the first disciples, and you and I. God calls us. How will we respond to that call? Let's make our sung response our constant prayer. Let's sing, Take, O take me as I am. Oh, take me as I am.
Summon out what I shall be. Set your seal upon my heart and live in me. Take me as I am. Summon out what I shall be. Set your seal upon my heart and live in me. Take me as I am. Summon out what I shall be.